you hear that seeming contradiction between the two sources, and we'll see everyone's responses come up on the screen now as you write them. So whoever the designated person is for your group should start typing. And then Michal, maybe you can hit mute on everyone, and then I'll mute myself. Okay, if everybody goes to that link now, you should be able to type in your answers, and it should pop up on our screen in front of us. Let's see if it's working. There we go. Source 1 seems to suggest that weakness can bring us to a depressive state, and we should focus on strengths. Source 2 says that we can grow from our weaknesses and can be a blessing. That's a beautiful summary which points out the contradiction, right? What should we do? Should we focus on our strengths and not get depressed? Or should we focus on our weaknesses and be a blessing, but maybe get depressed? What's going on over here? Someone says, if you learn to recognize and understand your internal strengths, you can use them to conquer the areas of your life where you feel weaker. And that may be true, that the more I become a strong person, the more I'm in touch with what makes me great, then I'm going to be able to overcome all the forces against me. But source 2 seemed to say, focus on the forces, on the places where the forces are against you. So we're still looking for somebody to speak out clearly a resolution. Source 1 says we should live in our strengths and not focus on the weaknesses, but source 2 says the negative experiences give us the opportunity for growth. I'm saying that with an exclamation point. What are we going to do? What should we do? If you had to choose now to focus on your strength and your weakness, we're still stuck. Working towards our higher self requires taking a godly perspective of ourselves, keep a positive perspective in the context of God, and understand both strengths and weaknesses as necessary. Forces to grapple with pursuit of growth. Looking at the two sources, I think the takeaway is not to get in the way of our passions and strengths, but we are fully capable. Okay, now it's starting to overlap. There's just going to change the now it should flow and we'll see everybody. So source 1 talks about the negatives of your weaknesses, but source 2 talks about the positives of your weaknesses. That's right. You can acknowledge your weaknesses without focusing too heavily on them. There's someone who's trying to resolve it, right? You can acknowledge them, just don't focus on it. Recognize it, see how they help you grow, but stay balanced. If you change your mindset, you can begin to acknowledge and name your weaknesses as potential strengths and potentially growth areas. This way you don't get caught up focusing on weak points. You only see them as potential to grow. So somebody's screaming out that they need to know the answer. Have a wonderful Shabbos, everybody. See you next week. Just kidding. I wouldn't leave you flat. But these are amazing. I'm really enjoying reading this flow chart over here of everyone's ideas. And I could sit here for the next 10 minutes. And I think what people are saying are true. And a lot of people are pointing out the dilemma that we're having. Don't ignore your strengths, but you're still going to come across weaknesses. You can't let them stop you from growing. This is all true. This is all true that there's two sides to us and we have to deal with it. The question is, each source is for sure focusing on choosing. Source 1 is saying choose strengths. Source 2 is saying you're going to find your greatness in your challenge spots. So let's try to figure this out together. So let's go back to our presentation over here. Share screen. Here we go. So this is the source that we were looking at, and we see that it says each person should know that the areas in which his evil inclination most attacks him, he's most prepared to become clean and pure in those matters. In those matters that he's most often negligent, he should know that there, specifically there, he can become great, he can become honest, he can become pure-hearted. So how are we going to reconcile that with Revolvi teaching us that a person has to focus on his strengths? So I think the key lies in a few exactitudes in the text. First thing that struck me is that Tzaddik is focusing us on looking at our evil inclination, the Yetzer Hara, where a man has two voices going inside of him. He has the Yetzer Tov and the Yetzer Hara. The Yetzer Tov is that voice that's trying to tell him the right thing to do, the thing in line with goodness, with God's will, with Torah, with morality. And the evil inclination are the forces that are coming to try to tell us to go against that. And both of those voices go on inside of us. And of course, it's very hard to know which one is which, and we'll come back to that in a little while. The second exactitude on the text is that Reb Tzaddik is focusing us on the areas in that we're most often negligent. So far I see it's where I have an evil inclination or where I find myself to be negligent. And finally, the third exactitude is, he says it's where the desire and passion overcome him most. That's where he's going to find his greatness. I think if we think deeply about this source, what we see is that it's not at all a contradiction to the first source. It's speaking about a different operating system. The first source is speaking about our traits. Find your great character traits. Find your talents. Find your unique strengths. The second force is saying every man with his unique strengths and character traits is going to have a lot of forces, external forces that are trying to get in the way of it. You could call it the evil inclination, that other voice that's trying to get him off. You can call them the desires and the lusts and the passions that are trying to get him off course. There's a word, taiva, that we're going to see soon for extreme physical passion. And then there's a word of cheshik, which means emotional passion. We have lots of emotional and physical pulls that get in the way of doing the right thing. Everyone, you just watch a kid, right? Every kid knows that he should let his sister have the cookie, right? But that passion and that strong physical pull of having the chocolate chips, he's going to grab it right now. And everybody knows that you should speak nicely to somebody and you should be patient. But there's an emotionality that can overtake us when somebody's really getting on our nerves. So what Rav Tzaddik is saying is wherever you find that those external forces, the passions and the pulls and the evil inclinations are getting you most, that's going to point you right to your strength. That's going to point you right back to Rav Volvi. It's a different way to get to the same place. And this is novel, right? As Rabbi Taub would say, I'm jealous that I don't have my British accent, right? But, he could be jealous that he doesn't have his Long Island accent, right? But if you think about it, he would say, if you think that's not a novel idea, that's a novel idea, right? This is what we have to realize, that that's a massive paradigm shift, that we look at our backhand as something to jump around and to move around. And that's what the Future Stars philosophy was. Kayla wants to know, was I a future tennis star? So, okay, I actually got the one sport that I'm actually good at is tennis. Okay, I never made it to the big leagues, and maybe it's because I took their philosophy too seriously. If I had known this Reb Tzaddik, I'd probably be a better tennis player. That you have to know that your backhands are not something to dance around. Your backhands are something to embrace, because they point you towards another way to get to your forehands. They show you where you're great, where you might not have otherwise picked up that you're great. And to spell it out a little bit, there's three major evil inclinations, according to Ethics of Our Fathers. Some of you may have come across this. It's a fairly famous teaching. Rabbi Elazar HaKapar Omer, Hakina v'hataiva v'hakavod motzi'in et ha'adam na'olam. Rabbi Elazar HaKapar says that there's three major evil inclinations that take you out of the world. The first one, kina, jealousy. Really, they're wanting what the other person has. There's a limited pie. If he's got a piece, then I lost my piece and I've got to grab his piece. The second major force of evil that takes us out of the world is taiva. That's physical, strong physical desire, what we call lust. That's that chocolate chip cookie I have to have at any moment, any time, without anything getting in my way. That's strong physical pull. And then finally, there's kavod, which is, in this context, means false honor. It means an unhealthy, it means a desire for honor, running after honor, false honor, fame for the sake of fame. Those things, very powerful words, take a person out of the world. That means he leaves reality. Anyone knows if they've ever seen somebody in a state of extreme jealousy or extreme lust or extreme egotism, they look different. They look like they've lost their mind. Sometimes you see that guy, going crazy on the cashier line at the supermarket, right? He's lost his mind. Of course, we may know from ourselves that when we get in that state where it's overtaking us, we feel that we've lost it. We feel that we've lost control. We feel that we're not even in reality. You see a kid get into one of these moods where he's in one of these states, to wait a couple of hours. I'm talking about children, my children. I know, wait a couple of hours to talk to them. They're not home. They're in planet jealousy land, right? You have to wait till the person comes back to reality. Guess what? It turns out that these are revelatory tools. And that's what Reb Tzadok is teaching us. If a person finds that he has a very strong, out of these three, and by the way, all of our different evil inclinations, all the different shades of them, generally fall into these three categories. I know there's a lot of names in the thesaurus and in the dictionary for forces that get in the way of our goodness, whether it's stubbornness, whether it's frustration, all the different names. They generally, depending on what we mean by that shade of it, it falls into one of these three. So if you or I think about the major nouns or adjectives that describe the feelings I get and the forces that overcome me, most often, my weaknesses, as Reb Tzadok is calling it, where I'm struggling the most with these evil inclinations, with these negligencies, with these desires, if I think about which one of these three they fall into, I can reveal a lot about my strengths. For instance, the person who falls into the category of different shades of jealousy, of wanting and needing what other people have, of wanting to put other people down, to put himself up, that basically is fine as long as there's nobody else with something. And then when somebody has something, then that ticks them off and that turns them, that starts getting in the way. So that person should know that the opposite effect is going to be, the opposite strength that's inside of him is probably going to be loving kindness and warm-heartedness. He's going to be a person who has an immense power to love other people, to give to other people, to be warm, to be flowing, to be a giver. That person has to have that negative counterpoint to preserve his free will, that there's a battle, that there's a growth that can occur. If I have, it's like Sir Isaac Newton's law, that whatever has a force in one direction has an equal and opposite force in the other direction. If I have a strong force of jealousy, whatever shade it is, falls into this category that's coming at me, it reveals to me that I have a massive potential. And this generally means that the person operates more in the emotional plane, and he should know that all of his other talents and all of his other strengths where he has a major in is going to be in generally the family that has to do with his heart level and his emotional plane. Likewise, if a person finds that he has a very strong physical pull, whether it's physical pull in terms of food or in terms of relations or in terms of sleep, in terms of whatever the different parts of our physicality are, he's a very earthy person. He's very in touch with the earth forces. that person should know that that's revealing a tremendous, tremendous power that he does, according to this, have inside for self-control and fortitude. His strengths, all the different categories of his strengths that Revolvi would tell him to focus on, are going to fall generally into this category. He can be pure. He can be in control, autonomous. He has a strong justice trait that he can use to take control of himself. It's just that the lust is there to counteract that. The same person who's going after that, all the physical pulls, that means that he can be actually massively disciplined, because that's the opposite. That self-control is the opposite of going with your bodily lusts. And he should know that, of course, many of his traits that he's good at are going to have to do with the physical world and being on the physical plane, on the bodily plane. And then, of course, if you're a good test taker, you know what's left. Kavod, honor, false honor. This is a person unlike jealousy. Jealousy is, I'm fine, but when another person has something, I want it. The kavod person, he could be alone. He could be, the other people don't have to have anything, but he wants to be noticed. If it's about the false honor, he wants to receive that glory and that fame. He wants to be on the cover of the magazines. He wants to stand out. He wants that significance. And again, if he's going after it, there's a positive significance, right? People who need to be needed are generally very good service people. They're people who serve other people. If you don't need to be needed, right, you're going to be a bad doctor, a bad rabbi, a bad postman. You know, you have to need to be needed if you're going to help people. But we're talking about the person using it in the other direction of egotism, of craving that fame. So he should know that he actually has a tremendous power in the area of honor. That type of honor is sheker, as we say. It's falsehood. It's, what is it anyway? What do you mean? I'm the center of the universe? That doesn't make sense, right? That person has a tremendous power to pursue truth, to create balance. He's often the person who can take two opposite parts and put them together into a balance, because if he has a quest for falsehood and a quest for disequilibrium, then that means that's an evil inclination, that he must have that powerful force opposite that to fight that. And he's going to be more on the intellectual plane. That's why this is, out of all the inclinations, the quest for honor is the more intellectual thing. It's an intellectual idea. It's not coming from a physical bodily place or from an emotional place. It's some warped intellectual idea that I should be noticed, that I'm the center. So it turns out that these two ideas are really, Reb Volvi and Reb Tzadok really work beautifully together. What we have is, we have both sources saying a person has to figure out what makes him unique. Now, when things are going well and he has clarity and his friends tell him what he's good at, and the newspaper tells him what he's good at, and his own mind tells him what he's good at, that's great. But what happens when he's struggling? He's hitting the floor with all these struggles, all these desires that are pulling him in different directions, that he feels, that's not my best self. That's not really me. That's a force getting in the way. That's my evil inclination trying to get me off track. The thing I just said, the explosion I just had, what's going on in my head, what's going on with my lack of control, that's not me. It's things getting in the way. Well, guess what? That's also a tool to point us towards exactly what we were put on this planet to do. It's a tool to point us towards finding our strengths so that we can know what we're supposed to do. And that's this beautiful Reb Volvi that I want to put on the screen right now in front of you. When Hashem created the world, you have to know that he aligned his creation to each and every human being destined to be created. That's what it means that there was only one man and one woman, Adam and Eve, Adam and Chava. The world was created for one man and woman set. That stays for all time. That's a microcosm for all, even with the 6 billion people in the world really is tailored around every single man and every single man-woman set. Therefore, each person in every generation, being that he is part of this original human, he has to know he's unique. There's not one who is similar to his fellow. Not one in his particular generation, but in every generation that was before him or that will be after him, there is no other person similar to him. Not only in his generation is he unique. But if he would go back to all the history books and all the people you can search for on the internet and go forward, he would still be able to say he is unique. He's 1 in 6 billion, and there's no other person similar to him. This uniqueness places an awesome obligation on each and every one to know that for him, the world was created, and to know what is unique obligation in the world that Hashem has created for him. We're put on this planet to figure it out. Figure out what's that future star inside of me. You don't need tennis lessons for this. Figure it out. I can figure it out by having a clarity in my strengths. I can figure it out even when I'm struggling, even when resilience is called for because my evil inclination is just whacking me and not allowing me to be the person I know I can be and the best person that I want to be. Even in those moments, rather than getting depressed, despaired, or beating myself up for falling prey to those powers, I can actually stop and say, whoa, this points to a set inside of me, a whole set of greatnesses, a whole set of strengths. And I've got to remind myself of them. I've got to figure out and clarify more what they are, because that's what I was put on this planet to do. Now, it's hard to know which voice is the voice of clarity and which voice is the voice of the evil inclination. And there are different ideas on how to figure it out. One real powerful way that I know of and that I've learned from Rav Yerucham Levovitz, the great spiritual leader of the Mir Yeshiva, a yeshiva that I ended up spending many years of my life in. But of course, Rabbi Yerucham was the spiritual leader of the yeshiva during the world wars. He says that generally the evil inclination is loud. He's the one you hear very loud, very vociferously, very boisterously. And the pure inclination, the true self, the true soul talking about who you are and what you want is generally quiet. And you have to put out the noise to hear that quiet. And that's what's going to point us in the direction. If it's coming from that real me, it's my strength. If it's coming from that external force, then it points to my strength. It's my struggle, and might be my lifelong struggle and my biggest struggles, but I can use that to bring myself back to the real me. And that's the basic idea that I wanted to give you tonight. I'm going to end with none other than the big man of the film industry. You know, you can take a guy out of USC Film School, but you can't take the USC Film School out of a guy that is. After Penn, I went off to film school and did spend a large part of my life towards this. And I want to show you something that Steven Spielberg says, and I don't think he realizes. Maybe he learned it with a rabbi of his, maybe not. I don't think he realizes how deep it is, and I think we're gonna understand it now thanks to the examination that we just did together about 10 leagues under the sea deeper. So I'm gonna hit play on this, and hopefully you'll be able to hear it.
When you have a dream, it doesn't often come at you screaming in your face, this is who you are, this is what you must be for the rest of your life. Sometimes a dream almost whispers. And I've always said to my kids, the hardest thing to listen to, your instincts, your human personal intuition, always whispers, it never shouts. Very hard to hear. So you have to, every day of your lives, be ready to hear what whispers in your ear. It very rarely shouts. And if you can listen to the whisper, and if it tickles your heart, and it's something you think you want to do for the rest of your life, then that is going to be what you do for the rest of your life, and we will benefit from everything you do. Thank you very much.
So he listened to his whisper, and we can listen to our whisper and become the greatest version of ourselves, do good for the world, do good for humanity, and take it to a new level. That's what I wanted to leave you with. Now we'll open it up to questions, chat room, whatever works for people.
Any questions here for Rabbi Styne before we let him go to bed.
I'm sorry to keep you, but if you could just, you're saying that where we think we have weaknesses, like you're arguing that there's like the counterbalance, and that's where we can find our strength.
You got it. And it's exactly. And it's a weakness. Reb Tzadok is teaching us that it's a weakness because it's not in a character weakness. It's an external force weakness.
Oh, okay.
Your soul is your soul and your whisper is your whisper. There's a lot of forces and voices that come to get us. Jealousy, they're in the category of jealousy, in the category of false honor and fame, and in the category of physical pulls that are taking us away from the loftier goals. When these evil inclinations, these forces that represent themselves as ourselves, they're voices inside of our head, they're pulls inside of us, but they're external to us. And once we third person it, and we realize that's not us, that's a force that's trying to derail us, we can say, whoa, well, where does that force point me to then? Where is actually my greatness? And it's the counter to that force. That's why that force is so strong in us. That particular force is strong because we have the potential to battle it. Otherwise, we would never have that force so strong inside of us. So wherever it's the strongest means that God implanted in us a counter force to battle that and to win. And we make our whisper stronger and louder, and we bring ourselves out.
Thank you.
Can I ask you a question, please?
Sure, Aaron.
So if those big downfalls of ours are a result of external forces, then what exactly is our Yetzer Hara, and how does that manifest itself?
The word Yetzer means to create. God put in man two creative forces. There's Yetzer Tov and Yetzer Ra. There's the evil inclination and good inclination are bad translations. It means creative force for the good, creative force for the bad. The creative force for the good is our divine image. That's our true self. That's our soul. The other force is an external force that was implanted to allow for this battle. Because, and this is a larger discussion, but that battle and winning that battle is what allows us to become more godlike. Because God could have just made us perfect individuals with only that Yetzer Tov creating for the good all the time. We wouldn't be like God then, because we wouldn't have owned anything. We wouldn't have earned anything. To be like God, we have to work for it, and it has to become part of ourselves. So that counterforce is there as a good, as in a goodness. It's there to bring out, to make us bring out our Yetzer Tov. So that's the goal.
Could I just ask one more question?
Sure, Alana, but let's just wait 1 second because I thought I saw somebody's hand go up, and then we'll come back to you. Did I see wrong? Was somebody else about to speak?
That's it. Alana, go ahead. You're the last question of the evening.
So you say like external force weakness versus character weakness. So like character weakness, that's like more the realm of anger that we were talking about versus like, I guess, I mean, I'll email you. I'm just curious about like how we think about like character weakness versus external force weakness.
That's a good question. Yeah, we should take that offline, but I think it really has to do with whether it falls into one of those three categories, and it also has to do with whether it's something that is I'm exhibiting on a regular basis or something that's coming in and smacking me from time to time.
Okay, thank you.